back in Toronto with Kyle. It's sort of right when I was in high school is when I met Kyle. I was out PAing on Little Nothing shoots as we both sort of grew up together, and eventually he was my DP on a couple of movies before he retired.
I was gonna say, found your way to our little nothing shoots, and then guys the limit, off you went.
Yeah, something
Yeah,
like
yeah, something like that. What's the last feature you worked on? Can you
that.
tell us the name? Oh,
It was
Cody.
actually with Justin Dyke,
Oh
who
yeah,
I would say
how'd that go?
it went. Uh,
oh, oh, that's nice. Okay, well, you and I'll dish about that later.
yeah,
What?
I am optimistic about the movie itself, but yeah, it was a bit of a journey to get it done.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I can
yeah,
see
that was God. What was that called? Casket Girls.
Cassie.
Um,
That's what it's
yeah,
called. A
yeah,
horror.
yeah. It was a horror movie. It was supposed to be Lionsgate, and then right before they started, it got sold or something. Like Lionsgate said they're not going to do it, and then it got picked up by a smaller studio, and so it was a bit of one of those scenarios where you have this movie with a budget, and then all of a sudden you have somebody who says, "Oh, you guys can fit it in this box, right?"
Oh no.
So there was a
Wow.
lot of creative pain to make it happen, but
Justin's familiar with those sorts of last minute
yeah.
spot. Was Keith? Did Keith write it? Was Keith involved?
Uh, no, so it was like a full-blown thing with Lionsgate for a while, like years, and then when it got essentially the green light went to red, like they did all their cuts because of all the things happening recently. Um, when it got picked up by Lighthouse Studios, Justin and Keith both did a pass over it. So like they were the writers, I believe, during production, but it wasn't their asset.
Okay, so why don't we start with I sort of promised the kids we talk about unions today. So
Uh-huh.
why don't we talk a little bit about what that process looked like for you starting? So you've done a bunch of like rinky dink low budget Christmas movies with me and J Man, and then you sort of entered into the training program. So what did that process look like? How did you get that started? And
Yeah, so I guess I should say I've been in IATSE for probably close to at least 9 years, maybe going to 10. I don't know.
yeah,
On the camera side, that's been my union. And essentially, I started out in the indie world. I was a PA and then a grip, electric, all those sort of things as you figure it out. And then I got into camera. I did about 3 or 4 years of indie camera work, mixed with whatever else I could get my hands on. And I sort of got to the situation where I had a couple of DPs ask me if I could do larger shows. I mean, like the smallest of possible union shows. But at the time, is out of my scope. Uh, and so I knew to sort of bridge the gap from like small indie to union is in a lot of ways it's not a huge gap, but at the same time, technically it is. So like as far as the equipment and um, dealing with production and the studios and all that. And so I talked to IA and I joined as a trainee to do a few rotations, um, which was super informative. Just like the paperwork of it all, like to make sure you're doing things in a way that holds up legally. Taking it quite seriously is a very hard skill to learn on indie, and so I do credit the training program for so much of that, where you save a lot of painful learning, right? Like if you let somebody go improperly, you can be hell on earth. And so to be able to sort of go through that in a trainee, you have kind of immunity from it, and you get to watch was a really valuable thing. And then from there, I have upgraded throughout. Yeah.
so the specifically joining the training program, were there like did you need references for that process? So you were like some of these larger DPs that you were working with were hoping to get you on big shows. Did they have to sign paperwork for you or just give you
Yeah, essentially, it's all laid out really simply on their website. So if you just look up IATSE trainee program, like you'll find out the criteria because it can change over the decades. But what they require are three letters of recommendation, ideally from my members, but not a hard rule, as well as, of course, your resume, CV, and a cover letter, just sort of, this is who I am, this is where I'm at, and this is where I want to go. It's a pretty straightforward process. Getting those letters is probably the most challenging part of it, depending on how much indie experience you're getting. Um, and with that, I found like it's kind of an unwritten thing that a lot of the times you'll write the letters on behalf. So somebody will agree and say, "Yeah, I'd love to give you a reference." And you talk to them and say, like, "Okay, cool. Do you have time to write it, or do you want me to draft something out and you can edit it and sign it?" Anyway, I'm just saying that's how the world works. Don't be afraid to take that route. I know from the other end too, it can be a bit difficult on your weekends to try and draft that stuff up when you're shooting.
That's usually what I do with these guys after they graduate. If they ask me for a letter of recommendation, I say, yes, just write something and I'll stick my name at the bottom of it.
But now we have ChatGPT, so you can write your own letters of recommendation in a second and get someone to sign it in another second.
There you go.
2 seconds.
There you go. We're okay with that use of AI in the industry, I suppose.
Yeah.
Reference letter. Yeah.
Okay, so the next part of your journey is what I always find the most interesting. So work was, I mean, you were getting a good amount of work in Toronto. You'd worked on Shazam, right?
Yeah.
Dropping buses off the Gardner and whatnot. But you were having trouble finding the like ACAM first position.
Not necessarily. I think my main issue with Toronto was geographic, but it is a different market. The main thing that pushed me out was just working overnights in the winter hurts. And after a certain point of time, if you can get jobs where it doesn't hurt, then it makes sense to do so. But at the same time, like that during the winter season, when I was starting out, was where I would get all the sort of opportunities, right? Like the jobs that are bigger than you've done. And it's because all of the people who don't, you get paid the same to, like, if you're sitting in a studio on your ass shooting Degrassi, it's the same rate as if you're freezing your ass off in the cold making a movie that's also not good. And so that's where, the youngins get to go and deal with that.
Right? Matthew's got the idea. Look at that hat. That Sandra's coat. He'll survive. You got to go work on these cool things. So, but there were some opportunities that were presented for you on the left coast.
Yeah.
Right? And you just threw everything in your cool sports car and you just headed out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was obviously a different market. It changes every few years, big time. But what had happened was BC was really dead in 2012 due to they got rid of their tax credit, like political reasons. And then it all sort of came back all at once in, I think, 2015 or so. But all is to say, like they lost all their crew because 4 years of no work, and then it all came back at once, and so they were really desperate for people, and that's where I was able to get bigger opportunities, is because they didn't have anybody with really training out there that wasn't super busy. Yeah, and so like it's, to me, when those opportunities are presented, like you just have to jump on it and ride it and see what happens, because they don't stay open forever. As we can all see how like the markets have shifted so much since 2019.
Yes. Yeah, so we had a couple students that wrote on set earlier on this week and saying that some of the union people were feeling optimistic. How are you feeling?
Optimistic, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's shaping up to be a good year. Not busy by traditional standards, but at the same time, so many members have had to move on with their lives that I think it will feel busy because we have less workers, right? So I know at least a dozen friends who've had to get a desk job or something. If you were carrying a mortgage and then the rates go up right as the work goes away, shit happens.
I've been telling these guys that since first semester. Like, listen, guys, the industry is rough right now, but luckily for you, people may just move on.
Yep.
So what you got some features booked for the year? What's on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so starting Wednesday, I go into prep for a movie that brings me to March. It's just like a little local film here. So I'll be doing Steadicam and whatnot on that. Should be fun. If I'm lucky, I'll shoot some second unit. And then immediately after that, there's a sequel to a movie I did last year called, oh, I shouldn't say maybe, but and then who knows? So there's rumors all the way through to the end of the year, which is nice. But I haven't signed on anything further than that, so we'll see. So it's also the tricky thing is, especially with like longer projects, is if you say yes to some TV shows, you now have to say no for that amount of time. Like having that integrity is like when people say loyalty, it's like if I sign up for a 5-month job, it doesn't matter who calls me, I'm going to be there and I'm going to do it because that was my decision, right? Like you made the bed, you sleep in it. And so that's where this time of year is strategic, I guess.
Chess game. So you're mostly working in Vancouver.
Victoria at the moment, and then it's once it gets to busy season, like in the summer, there's a bunch of contracts all over the world, really. So we'll see where I end up.
Is Victoria a shoot town now? Like, are you shooting a lot there?
It's always been a bit of like a hallmark town, and then every year there's at least like two, at least tier 1 or tier 2 shows.
So it's like the Ottawa, British Columbia.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. Which is nice. So, and then the way I looked at it is I travel for all of the good shows anyway, and so if I'm living in a hotel, I might as well have my house be somewhere I enjoy that I can afford. If you have an apartment in downtown Toronto, I promise you your commute still sucks ass.
Oh yeah.
They know.
Oh yeah.
They know. Yeah. You mentioned a couple of sort of tier 1 shows. Can you explain that a little bit to these guys? What you mean by these tier 1, tier 2?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a shorthand in that through all the unions, they have contracts that are based on budgets or different criteria. And so when I say tier 1 in the IATSE 669 world, that means it's a feature that is above 14 million. And that sky's the limit. And this is where I say if you're freezing your ass off here or if you're in a studio there, you get paid the same rate. Is that all of these tiers essentially are your base rates. So 14 million, you get paid the exact same as you would on 400 million, unless you negotiate above that scale. And that is something that comes later when you can provide value that other people can't within your same position, right? So right now, not many people are getting over scale because there's 5 people to every position. In the summer, that's where you have a bit of leverage, that sort of thing. You know.
Cool.
Yeah. What kind of Steadicam work do you do? And how did you get into Steadicam work? That's always a topic of discussion because it's very specialized work. The gear is almost very much tailored to you after you buy it and own it. So how did you put one foot in front of the other when you went into that?
Yeah, so Steadicam, I toyed with it for a long time. Kyle knows, but hopefully you guys have heard of Rusty Young. But he's a friend that we have mutually who's arguably one of the best steady ops on earth. I have known him very well for a long, long time. And
yeah, Russ from Hamilton.
Yeah.
North Film Co.
Yeah.
So there was a brief moment where I was a partner in that company.
No way. So you know Kat as well.
Yeah, I was there the day they met.
No way. What show was it?
It was a music video she was directing, and we came out. Pretty much the rest is history there.
That's cool.
Yeah. So they're a very fun group, super talented, and they go about it in a they kind of tackle all of it at once. It's not as segregated as a lot of shows are, which is really interesting with the way they work. But yeah, so I was exposed to extremely good Steadicam for so long, and when I started DPing more and more, it got more and more tempting because I always enjoyed it. Like I've thrown the rig on many times. Anybody who's even remotely interested, I'd say just try and put the rig on. If you see somebody, usually people are pretty liberal with like letting somebody give it a go. And Yeah, it was during the strike when I had all this free time and I was looking on the internet, and I had known the rigs for so long, but that was a good time to buy because people were offloading it because they needed the money, but it was a bad time to buy because there's no friggin' work to pay for the thing. Um, and there it
Oh, there
is.
it is.
Yeah, and I've spent like the last whatever year and a half practicing every day or building out the kit and all that. It's an extremely evolved or involved thing. Um, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's essentially, I would say it's a lot like dancing actually. You've got to kind of plot out your path and memorize your moves and whatnot, and then you just kind of flow.
And is there like a friend of mine, a colleague of mine actually, are there any specific training academies or courses that you're aware of? One of my friends went down to Los Angeles last 2 years ago to complete one, and he came back a Steadicam off.
Yep. Yeah, so Steadicam is the big buy-in. The rigs themselves are not cheap. A lot of people get starter rigs. Sorry, that's not a starter rig. Where you get to sort of experiment with something that can fly a very small camera, but all of the mechanics are the exact same. But they have Steadicam workshops, and that is by far the most effective way to learn. But they themselves are extremely expensive, so it can be between 5,000 to 10,000 US to do those courses, where you go down and they put you up in a hotel and you're there for a week or two. There's actually one. I'm trying to remember if it's in Georgia. Anyway, I don't remember where, but the inventor of Steadicam still does teach at one of those courses just to explain how useful they can can be.
And is it
So
still based on the machine gun tech? On how, like, is that still the same tech? Like,
yeah,
it was the mounting systems on helicopters, right? That inspired.
I'm not sure actually
That's what I've read. That
if
it was like the machine gun mounts on the helicopters, that kind of balancing those kind of gears and whatnot that inspired the tech of the Steadicam. Yeah, to keep it.
that to me sounds like it might be modern gyros. I could be wrong, but Steadicam is an entirely mechanical thing. And there's actually a really great Deacons podcast if anybody wants to really nerd out, about anything, listen to that. But where Garrett Brown, the inventor, goes on, he talks about when he first was designing the thing. And yeah, it's essentially you have a big arm that takes all the Z axis, and then you have your gimbal. But the whole gag with Steadicam, the way I describe it, is it's essentially very smooth handheld. It's not a dolly. It's not a Ronin. And as soon as you start thinking about it in that, you can kind of understand what shots deserve it or need it. And the reason being is like I can just react instantly. I'm moving everything. Versus as soon as you go onto like a Ronin, there's a delay, and often there'll be two operators, somebody moving the gimbal and then another person on the wheels. Or if you're holding the gimbal, there's a deliberate delay so that it smooths everything out. Um, anyway, yeah.
So would you say there's a little bit more free form than even like on a dolly? Like because dollies you have to really choreograph and orchestrate everything that's happening. But with Steadicam, does that allow you to like sort of react to an actor's movements a little bit more intuitively or
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that to me is the biggest appeal. So like when I'm shooting, a huge thing for me is just being honest to like whatever the action is or the scene. And I find the more you limit the camera, like that's a stylistic choice, right? So if the camera is locked, if the actor misses their mark, it just doesn't work. But if you are in a scene where you want to follow them, you want to feel it, you're part of it, right? Like the camera is the audience. And so sometimes the worst thing you could do is put the camera somewhere the audience just kind of wants to do this. You're in the theater and you're like, but what the hell's over there? Or something's a bit off. And so Steadicam gives you the freedom to put the camera exactly where it belongs, right? And so between the takes, you can have your marks and hit everything perfect, but in reality, it's nice to just be able to judge things just a little bit here or there. Yeah, again, it's kind of like handheld, right? Like shit hits the fan. It's nice to pick the camera up, get exactly what you want where you want it, but then you get to the edit and you're like, oh man, that's sloppy.
Now, if you're like, okay, so if you're going straight to your B or A show, it's fine. like those shows, you can have Steadicam as many days as you want, usually, you know, and whatnot. But for those who are like going to create their own stuff, like produce or direct, what tips would you have for them when they're looking at their schedule and they want to incorporate Steadicam, but they only have money for a few days? Like, how do you figure out where and how and why and when to bring Steadicam?
Yeah, I mean, there's a thousand different ways those deals get done. Obviously, one way would be if you have the luxury, you can stack your scenes towards an expensive piece of equipment or location, or like if you have all 30 extras in one scene or in your movie, just put all those scenes on the same day, and now you have your extras for the same price, right? It's the same with the Steadicam. Um, but a very common practice is you would hire the operator who owns the equipment. And usually Steadicam operators are also operators. So you can hire me without it. And then you say, hey, if we give you a weekly fee for Steadicam, can it just be run of show? And so usually on a TV show, they're not paying every time they use it. They just have it, right? And it'll just be some set weekly fee. And it almost is an incentive then for the director or the production to use the thing. So the cranes are often like that too, because it's a huge advantage to whites or whatever to not have to ship the thing back and forth every day. Um, and but beyond that, sometimes it's pay to play, because that might be cheaper if you have a movie where it's like, well, we got 15 days and only 2 of them do we need the thing. You come out as an operator and we'll give you just a bump on those 2 days. Sort of that's how it shakes down. At the same time, when you guys are like in the position you are now, just ask people, because a lot of like myself included, like I own the gear. If there's free time, it's fun to go out and shoot even just like little short films with people who are learning, because it's also just time and attention for everybody, right? Like Russ would be a good example. Somebody's never going to be insulted at an invite to the party, right? As long as you're transparent about what it is, right? As soon as you start trying to pretend that we have money, and that's when people get frustrated. But
Transparency and incentive. Even if the incentive is not money, make it that you're a good person.
We talk a lot about those relationships. Mike, just in terms of, just to give these guys an idea of like generally some of the numbers, without asking you how much money you spent on your Steadicam, but like sort of what's kind of the investment range to get sort of a full rig set up, and what kind of additional value can that bring to your day rate?
yeah, so what you're going to do with it is just the most important thing by a huge margin. If you're shooting just for yourself, there's glide cam would be a good example, but there's some really lightweight rigs that again mechanically are the same. So if you know how to balance and run a Steadicam with a IMAX on it, you can get the same shot with DSLR on one of these smaller rigs. And so if it's for yourself, I recommend trying to spend the amount of money that makes sense. If you're trying to learn to become like a union operator, there's sort of 2 camps. You can get a starter rig, like I've just described. It's essentially a burner rig, right? There's the Zephyr is one that goes around a lot. I think that one's overpriced. But there's just so many people to buy it. They'll use it for a year or two just to learn or to do small little indie stuff. And then they completely just sell it and get the rig that can fly in Alexa or something, So, I guess sort of for ranges, like that first category, you're going to go and you're shooting your own music videos or something. You can probably get in for $1,000 these days. $2,000 is pretty healthy, I think, to get a used something or other on eBay. Be careful, obviously. Stolen gear is a thing, and yeah. But for like a starter rig, traditionally maybe around $5,000 to $10,000. And if you're going the starter rig route, your money is going to be better spent on the course than it is on the rig. Because that's sort of a serious proposition. Like you want to be good, and money doesn't really solve that. And then for a professional rig, realistically, you're kind of starting around 15,000, and that goes all the way up. You could spend 200 grand on a rig if you wanted to. Many do. Yeah. So the route I took was I got the what I believe to be the best price proposition for a rig that can fly IMAX. So it's a used rig. It's several models older. I know the guy who invented it. It's a Rever one, and I don't know, got what I thought was a pretty good deal. Because yeah, again, so anything brand new and from Steadicam brand or whatever, like you're looking 50 grand maybe all in. So
But now, you're what, you're adding maybe 1,500 a day to your rate, give or
well,
take?
that is the magic sauce. Yes. So a proper Steadicam rental for a commercial, you're looking just for the equipment, 1,000 to 3,000. I know some operators out there make as high as like 6 to 8,000, in addition to your operator rate. For a TV show, like one of those, like you're doing a deal, like it's more of a realistic thing is you get your weekly rental and then maybe you get an operator bump depending on how you negotiate. That might be between 1,500 to 2,500 a week, in addition to your rate. I promise you, you could spend every penny back on the equipment if you're not careful.
Sure.
Um, yeah, but and it also, like, so a big thing a lot of people get into it is because it separates you, right? And so it doesn't matter what profession, you're always looking for like uh, what sets you apart, why hire you? And so if they need Steadicam, all of a sudden they just can't hire you because they need an extra operator now. And so being able to provide that does give you some leverage to get better gigs. And yeah, I mean, that's part of it. So, which is why also I don't use it on every job. I wish I would, but sometimes it's just not right. Like the last movie we did just didn't really have anything that called for Steadicam. There was maybe one or two shots, um, which is fine.
I'm seeing it a lot on television shows more than anywhere else on TV shows, just so you can get your days because
yeah,
you can live on the steady and sort of get your day if you're thinking that way.
mm-hmm.
When you have 12 pages plus to shoot, or when you have
Yeah.
6 days to get a TV hour scripted, I think Steadicam helps with that a lot.
Yeah, so Steadicam is a fantastic tool in my opinion, just for that. Like I keep saying it's mechanical, and I think that's such an important factor. Once you guys are out there ACing, you'll understand. Ronins can do a lot of similar shots. I would argue differently, but they can fail on you without any outward sign as to why. Versus like a Steadicam, you could cut the cables running down it, it'll work, right? Like, I don't need real batteries. I could literally, and I've done this on like small cameras. Like I just will fasten like a literal lead brick to the thing to weigh it down. It's simple. With a good operator, like it can be slow in that some people when it's balancing or that, but that's user error, I would argue.
Yes.
So, or sometimes you could be like one challenge, and this goes for operating or firsting or anything, is if someone's asking you to do something that is not within the cards, or maybe goes against what the equipment you've chosen, it's very easy to have a cool shot and use the wrong gear, and all of a sudden it all falls apart. And so that's a big skill set as well. It's just trying to think of multiple ways to solve every problem so you can kind of land on the most efficient way to do it. Efficiency is rewarded heavily in this business.
Yes. Speed and efficiency. Just so I know, is that where you're kind of living these days? With operating Steadicam?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
Is that where you?
Yeah. So I'm on the indie side of it. Like I do direct some smaller like commercials or music videos, and I DP as much as I can. But Steadicam is kind of the bread and butter for the moment.
You want to open up some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, this is great. Any well, you know what, we'll save any like last minute.
I will say if anyone has any questions specifically like to trainee, second AC, first AC, obviously like operating and shooting, any of those categories, like feel free.
Questions? That's
Hello.
speak up.
Do you think it's hard to transition to becoming a DP while you're already an ISP first?
It's a good question. I don't know if there's any easy way to become a DP. Is probably my answer. I will say if you want to be a serious DP who does projects that have a large reach, that's probably going to be your best bet. I know a lot of people who've tried to become DPs without going into IA in a different category. It can be done, but it is very painful because um, in those positions, if you're on a large movie or like with a big enough budget, the DP is the manager of three different departments. Like they're technically the department head for camera, but they also are responsible for grip and lighting. Um, those are some skill sets that are extremely difficult to pick up while you're the boss. And so to be a first or a second or a gaffer or a key grip is just so helpful if you're going to do some bigger shows in that you know how the budgets work, you know how the equipment rentals work, you'll know when you're getting screwed or lied to, which will happen constantly. And again, it's so helpful in efficiency, right? So if you were a first AC, you might realize like, well, if we put that shot on the other side of the river, that's going to take a lot, right? And if you really want that shot, now you know how to help your team get there. Whereas a lot of DPs I've seen who kind of come from the commercial side of things or whatever, is they have a really hard time budgeting how big their asks are, right? And then all of a sudden you've just lost like an hour to something you thought would be so easy, and now the thing that's important is not so good. I would recommend actually in that scenario or any scenario, try if you want to be a DP, if you want to be a director or writer, do those things in whatever capacity you can. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't also try and use a career like a focus puller or something to learn. But those indie experiences are so valuable. And so if you're a trainee all the way up to an operator and then you go DP, so I sure hope you still DP'd some little music videos or even TikTok or whatever the hell, just to have a sense of like how that day goes, right? Like what those problems are like. Because I know so many people who say, "Oh, I'm a DP, but I do this." It's like, well, what have you done? And it's literally nothing. It's like, well, that's fine, but it's gonna hurt.
Thank you. That's works over at OC. He wants to go the camera route, so maybe I'll get him to send you some emails and pick your brain.
Sweet, absolutely.
Anybody else? Yeah, Taps, what's up? Speak up.
How are you? So, like, you move locations, and you're in before that. How does that work? Because I know some of them are regionalized, and some of them are kind of widespread across Canada. They use, like, you have a certificate area forever if you want to be union or relocate.
So, Mike, the question is like you're like IA out in Vancouver is a different local than Toronto. So, is there a process involved in going from, did you say 669 out west?
Yeah.
So, was there a process in going from 667 to 669, or do those worlds kind of easily communicate? Cass just doesn't want to be stuck in Hamilton forever.
Yeah, no, that's one of our really big benefits in Canada that you do not see in the States, is we have what is called a free flow agreement. And so IATSE 667 Toronto is a sister union to 669. And so if you're in 667 without any paperwork, you could do a 669 show. If someone's going to hire you without you being on the list, you can just do it. And essentially you just de facto become a permit on that. You get whatever the 669 rates are. If you do a bunch of those, 669 might ask you to join, but there's no pressure to do so. Now, if you're moving and you want to officially switch over, luckily 667 is a more expensive union to be in, and so you don't pay anything when you go that way. You do pay if you go the other way because the dues are higher, so you just kind of meet the gap. But that's it. It's fairly straightforward.
And do the other like this 873 or 411 work in the same way?
I couldn't speak to it, but I do know many people have done it. And like your experience will still count in either or, right? So the same application process, almost in verbatim, is in all of those unions. And so if you got approved for one, you should be approved for the other.
Yeah. Oh, I would imagine, like you said, when they got rid of the tax breaks in BC, it's not like all those people retired from the industry. They went to the East Coast or Toronto or Calgary or wherever else. You say Winnipeg's the hot spot now?
Manitoba, yeah. Manitoba tax credits are pretty intense right now. So there's a lot of investment, studio investment happening in Manitoba.
Mike wouldn't know Manitoba's fucking cold.
Yeah, winter pay.
Turn those down. Forget it.
I guess that's all in studio stuff. But like, there's no locations out there. I've shot it. There's nothing to shoot out there.
Well, I guess if you're shooting a season of Fargo. Sure, I guess.
Or if you're in a big sound stage, that works, right?
The last movie I did there was with Michael Jai White. I can't even remember the name of it. Doesn't matter. But we needed I guess it was a basketball like stadium for every single day of the movie except for one day in studio, which was just this little warehouse. And so that made sense as to why we're there. Is we basically bought out this entire arena.
And you used it as a soundstage?
Sorry?
Did you use it as a soundstage or as an arena?
We used it as an arena. Yeah, the whole movie took place within there, and then we did one scene just out of a little warehouse that they built up, like the I forget what the prologue.
I think Nobody, Bob Odenkirk's movie was shot out there, right?
Yeah. So my camera team on Prey did Nobody.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Mike worked on that last Predator.
Yes.
I'm gonna show them the mean picture you took after we're done chatting.
Oh my God, yes.
Still tickles me pink for this.
That was my favorite Predator by far.
It really is. I mean, like,
too.
It's like minimal horror that impacts.
Realistically, if the original and Prey were both released now, everybody would rip the original apart for the muscles and the steroids.
Yeah, I mean the
cheesemo.
The original is Arnie. Like it's just Arnie.
It's iconic. Wow. I mean, they're a close 1 and 2 for sure.
The difference in that I think Prey was a serious movie, and if you, especially with the lens of now, the original was a lot more
tongue in cheek.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I mean, written, directed, produced, all under the influence of party drugs, because that was 80s Hollywood. They were all high all the time, and everything was really messed up because of it.
That's when they were on uppers, though. That's
yeah, sure. That was a great question, Cass. Who's next? Who's got a question? Come on, guys. Ash, nice and loud.
So my question is that, as you said earlier, that you've invested a bit of money in your equipment, right? So is it a good idea to, as a new person in the industry, to invest money right out of school in order to, find things and stuff on gear?
Would you recommend that these guys go out and spend $2 million on a Steadicam right away, right out of school? No, Ash is just that is investing in a small piece of equipment. Is that a smart move? Like starting out before you've kind of made any industry connections.
It is a tough one to answer in that it is very specific to you and sort of how you want to go about it. What I will say is like the math that I find really important. So I bought a bunch of gear when I started, and then I sold all of it once I was going in the union because it was just a liability. Because it does depreciate like you wouldn't believe, and so every dollar you put in goes away. But then obviously like with Steadicam or like operating stuff, I've invested heavily because at a certain point it pays back out. And so when you're starting out, I would say you definitely don't want to provide what gear could be rented, right? And so if you're shooting at a scale that can afford rentals, spending your money so that those rentals become yours is probably not a great bet. So you can quickly grow out of your gear. And so like for myself, DPing, like I have always taken the rental route just because for me to go out, years ago and rent a A7, could have bought it, probably could have paid it off, but that wasn't the camera that I wanted to present as like, this is how we should shoot the project. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense, right? And then you kind of pigeon yourself into that because people know that it's yours, and so they don't want when they want a bigger shoot with an RE, it's they don't see you as that. And being flexible with equipment is a huge asset. And so if every project you have the same lenses and the same everything, you're quite limited to make different choices. That being said, there's nothing wrong with spending the money that it takes to do a demo reel, to shoot those smaller shoots to like, again, time under tension. I believe in that heavily. Like a small camera package makes a lot of sense because you just need to shoot a lot. But to think that you should just keep investing, like the Sony, whatever, the new one comes out and it's like, oh, they shot on that with the, oh God, I can't remember the name of that film at all last year.
The FX3 for the creator.
Nobody on earth needs an FX3 more than they need A7 III. It's, you know what I mean? I guess that would be sort of how I would slice that. And so, but if it does get you out and shooting, there's a huge value to that, right? And like it's you guys are paying for learning right now, and to a certain extent, you should be investing in your learning out there as well. But don't ever feel like you can't bid on a project or go and rent from like camera traders or something to get something done. Like so I was a photographer in high school and I learned really early, which was amazing. So I was buying up my own equipment, that to go to like Henry's and rent a $2,000 lens is $20. And so I stopped buying lenses. It's like, oh, I got to shoot $20 here. And I don't care if in 5 years I lost money. It's nice to not have to spend $2,000 every now and then.
With those big camera investments, if you're not being paid to use it 200 days a year, kind of a waste.
Well, and it also like they expire so fast as far as value that it is rare that it makes sense unless you're renting it out, obviously. But again, it's like the value more likely is going to be in you actually shooting those projects than it is you collecting the rental on that. That would be my thought. So you being able to pay your rent for another month and stay in this business and fight and go and shoot on your weekends is worth a lot more than most equipment. So that's sort of how I look at it now, especially when we have, the industry has kind of done this. My overhead, the amount of months I can go without having to go to apply at McDonald's is the most valuable asset I have, right? Because that means I can keep digging, I can keep getting better at what I'm doing. And obviously I've seen like many of my friends who didn't have that runway, who they were forced to pick a department or pick a career based on that. Which is also, I guess, your biggest asset right now is that all of you, I would presume, have some time to be shooting short films or music videos or whatever. And I promise you, if you get one shot that is worth keeping in your demo reel, then it was a worthwhile day. So like this fight for perfection doesn't matter right now, and that's so fantastic. And I would just encourage you all to like use this time, because really soon this time becomes really expensive.
Yeah, guys. Okay, who's got another question? Keep it coming. Louder, nice and loud. No.
What exactly is the union for? Is it synonymous with that of the industry in terms of deciding what to do, or are they looking for people with the most project
experience? What's the unions looking for, like in new recruit, like somebody with a huge amount of indie experience or the right connections? What would you say?
That's a really good question. And I guess, I don't know if you've gone over this, but what unions really are for. But so all that the union wants, their entire power comes from having all of the best people within those categories being union, right? So the fact that excellent focus pullers are hard to find if they're non-union is why IATSE gets to force these rates or these meal penalties and stuff. That's where it's all from. That's their power. And so all that they want to do on a new member is confirm that you're not going to cause problems and misrepresent that category. And so they have these different metrics to kind of prove it, right? And so if someone asks me for a reference letter and they're adequate at the job, but maybe caused, some sort of like HR concerns or something that was really, in my opinion, unprofessional, it's my job as a union member to not recommend them because I don't think that they represent what we should call a focus puller or whatever. That's sort of the trade-off. Once you're in the union, they make money off of you. So every dollar I make, they get 2 cents. And so they love new members. They want as many members as they can sustain. But at the same time, when work is slow, they are harder to get in just because they're trying to get people working who are already members. But essentially, the trade-off is that they provide us negotiation power. They provide us benefits, pension, and in that they will be the ones in the middle of those negotiations, right? And so it's very nice to have somebody go out and fight for meal penalty, turnaround, those sort of things. That is what they provide to me. The idea that somebody's paying my benefits and I didn't have to negotiate that or deal with it because there's so many different productions. But yeah, so I guess the main thing they're looking for is somebody who, like, as a trainee, has an interest and wants to do it, right? So the best thing you could do is genuinely start to believe I want to be a union second. If that's you, you go about your day and you try and learn those things and pursue that goal, they want you. That's the juiciest thing they can hear. What they don't want is somebody who wants to be a DP and says that, and so they're going to go and be a lousy second because they don't really want to do that, right? If that position is, they're essentially, for the trainee position, they're accepting that you're going to come without knowledge, right? We're going to train you all up. We're going to invest all that time and effort into you. And then all we need in response is for you to want to be good at that and to try hard. So I'd say those references essentially are just people who want to sign off that you are a professional individual, right? The way you carry yourself, that you're not too concerned with the gossip or that sort of thing. Those things will kill you.
That's a good question. All right, who's next? Yeah.
What's your worst experience being on set and
Worst experience?
Worst and best.
Worst and best. Okay. I definitely know my worst.
Let's say worst union experience and best union experience, so we don't have to talk about Black Pond.
Yeah, well, I guess a worst experience, I won't go into detail just because it's not fun, but just watching a very close friend of mine be injured doing a stunt. It's very real. Safety on set is a thing. And I promise you, if you do everything right, it still isn't perfectly safe. You have to look at the situations yourself and measure it, right? So I've been told, hey, we want the A camera right here while you do a car drifting around the corner. But between the car, the camera, and you just have a wall right there. And so everybody was fine with it. Safety said yes. The stunt person was so confident they were going to be good. And I said no, because if the car does do something wrong, there's nowhere to go. Right. And so that's a scenario where, okay, great. I understand you guys are all professionals and it's not going to go wrong. But if it did, it's certain death. And that's not okay. And so I've removed people from several situations over my career for that reason. And in that scenario, they did hit the camera. But yeah, so I guess the worst was, somebody did a jump out of a window and they missed the mat. That was not a good.
Wow.
Yeah.
We had stunt coordinator come in and chat with these guys last week.
John Stockford.
You ever come across this gentleman? He's
Not that I know of.
stunt coordinator in
Ontario.
Toronto, Vancouver, mostly Toronto.
Mostly Ontario.
Okay, best experience. Got a lot.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm probably taking that photo of the predator. No, I guess on prey, I have to answer with this is so I was the A first on prey, and one morning my trainee, so we were shooting until maybe 6 a.m. every day. And so I get in at whatever 5 p.m. is my morning, and my trainee comes up onto the camera truck and she's like in a huff. And she comes straight to me and she's like, "Hey, so last night I was on the way home and I like on the middle of the highway, I saw this animal. I didn't know what to do, so I got out, like just freaking out." And what had happened was she had found a dog on the way back, and we were in the middle of mountains in the middle of nowhere. And it was like a 2-month-old puppy. It was a total stray. But she didn't know what to do with it, so she just took it. She doesn't know how to deal with dogs. And I remember I mid sentence I just said, "Stop, stop, stop. Where's the dog?" She said, "Oh, it's in crew park." So I told her to go get the dog, forget about your job today, which crew park's a shuttle away. Just again to go like the stresses of the job, the priorities. So she brings the dog, and I remember I literally just declared dibs. But so that's my dog now. The working yeah. The working title for prey was Skulls, because he collects the skulls of his prey. And so my dog immediately got the nickname Scully. And that's her name.
That's a good story. Yeah, now the students are demanding the dog. So go get Scully.
Yeah. I've been offered many dogs on the end of Airbuds as well when they have puppies. So yeah, it's out there.
You did the Airbuds movie?
Yeah, I worked on maybe 6 Airbud productions. They transitioned into TV shows, and then the director and owner of the company, his house burned down in Malibu years ago, and he sort of hasn't really done much since. I mean, he's happy everyone's fine, but I think that was sort of the quiet. Yeah.
So when we were shooting in Barrie, our producer was too cheap to put any crew up, so Mike always used to sleep on my couch. And my wife and I, well, I guess girlfriend at the time, wife now, had 2 dogs and 2 cats. And Mike was horribly allergic to a combination of them, I guess.
Yep.
Would just be a disheveled mess for the entire run of show up in Barrie, because he was just breathing in all this dander all week. And then you went out to the West Coast and immediately signed up to do Airbud movies and adopted a dog. So now you're all, I guess you're immune now, yeah?
No.
Oh, that's a good story.
It's worth it.
Yeah. That was a good question. Well, everybody got anything? Okay, Matt, go on. Nice and loud. Mason has got more. All right.
Is that a good advice to, like, if you move to Vancouver, right, and Vancouver is moving, so is that good advice to move right now or close connection in Ontario, Toronto first, and that has a big influence in Toronto?
Sorry, I got most of that, but you're asking.
That's asking if he should move to Winnipeg because it's hot right now, or if he should like grind, if he should grind away a little bit in Toronto first, and then once he's made some connections, make the leap and go to the coldest place on earth.
Yeah, I mean it's that mindset will take very far. What the moment looks like is going to be different for every moment. I like sleeping on Kyle's couch is a good example of that kind of spirit, where you can kind of accelerate your career by saying yes to something that maybe is comes at a cost to yourself, right? Whether you should move to Winnipeg or not, I guess depends a lot on your experience and what you want to do. If you want to go and be a PA on some like relatively serious shows, you can do that pretty much immediately there. That's not a bad idea. So, but at the same time, figure out like, and going through the unions here and stuff, just seeing what the trainee requirements are. Like I remember I pulled that up. The training requirements, it's just on their page on IATSE, and I had that on my tabs for like 2 years. That is going to help a lot if that's where you're aiming. But I wouldn't move necessarily if you don't know a single person. Like you from here can look up what are the studios that are shooting. There are production lists online you should be able to access. Maybe not as detailed as the IA lists or whatever. But if you can find a production office there, it's just to reach out and say like, hey, I'm looking to PA or whatever. Like, what does that look like? Are you looking for anybody? Because yeah, you want to be able to put your foot in the door somehow. If you go to LA, it's a little easier because you know all of the names on the buildings. Something like Lighthouse or Hallmark or whatever may take more specific digging to get an email to say hello. But if you're looking to get into camera specifically in the training program, Toronto is a tough place, as in there's a lot of people. It's a busy market. It is by far the best place to learn. So the crews are extremely sharp. It's competitive, which means they have to be good. I think you'll find in certain areas around North America, if it's a booming town, there's a bit of room for people to be lazy and to be less trained. So Toronto is like the school of hard knocks, and you can get real sharp there, but you can also get really jaded, and that's kind of the trade-off.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, Pat.
Speaking of LA, is it impossible to like transfer to the States?
Is it impossible to?
transfer to the States.
Yeah, what's the process looking like going out to Hollywood to find a job?
I can't speak to immigrating to the States right now. I think we all know that that's going to be its own can of worms. It hasn't ever been easy, and it's yeah. So the biggest problem is going to be able to work in the States unless you have a visa or citizenship or whatever.
To that as well, I've been hearing from every EP and producer in the U.S. right now that they don't even care about O1 or O2 visas. If you're not an American, they're not going to hire you in the U.S. right now. That's what I've been hearing as of very late. So
Yeah, well,
like reputable showrunners and whatnot down there.
Yeah, no, I mean in LA, when times are tough, people get a bit more protective over who's working. I have felt it working in certain markets where there's lots of people available, but they called me for quality reasons. And LA is suffering really deeply on productions at the moment. Hopefully things change. The fire sure shit won't help. Obviously the studios weren't affected by that, but so what I will say is LA might be a tough market to get into at this very moment, but I do think within the next year things are subject to change dramatically. It just depends on what direction they go. LA is a place, like there is a lot of opportunity, and so if you are there and legally and you can grind, getting a position in as an office staff or as a PA or whatever is attainable and achievable. And they do, again, it's a merit-based system. So if you get there and you're willing to work hard and especially be honest and efficient, like, people will accelerate you up the ladder. But again, a big part of LA, and this goes with everything, is your burn rate is super high. And so like if I went there, I'd probably be a focus puller right now. You have to take some sort of step backwards just to make sure I could be busy. And so I would keep that in mind is when you go there, your value will be less just because you don't know anybody. And you have to start kind of from zero.
Just in general for like the States, like not even saying LA specifically, but like if you are in the union in Canada, is it like impossible to like work in the States at all?
Yeah. So I've worked in the States before. It depends on geographically where in the States, but a U.S. business can hire a Canadian citizen to work there on a contract. They'll have to pay a fee to get a work visa for you. I think it's like a B1, like a business visa. I've also gone in tagged on somebody else's O1 visa, and so that's somebody who has that visa. They can bring you out to support them in the position. And with the union, it is not free flow, and so they do technically can say no. But there's, if you get really into like the depths of contracts, there's always ways. And so one of the movies I did down there was in New Mexico. And it was essentially they didn't have any members that were local to this tiny town we were shooting in. And so the union had no means to say I can't do it. Right. But if I had tried to work in LA, they would have forced the production to at least call IA members first and then bring me, even though I'm also in IATSE, just a different country. So, and I have talked to the people at the union. Like 600 is sort of the all of America, and then there's all these different locals that operate within 600 essentially. And although they don't technically one-to-one match, like if you have credits in 669, they don't necessarily have to look at those credits as equal. But they do. And so like I've been offered to come into 600, but I don't have a green card. So very doable, long goals, but like I encourage you to pursue it. If that's where you want to live, I think it's worth the work. At the same time too, again, if you're able to get the visa stuff easy, being mobile always will be super beneficial in this business in any criteria. And so right now, Georgia has all these tax breaks. They're super busy. And so if you were to move somewhere like that, you might find way more opportunity than even in Toronto. It's the Manitoba of the States, but everything's bigger in the States. They have more work. When I look at their list, it pisses me off because it's so much longer.
Oh, that's really the Manitoba.
Yep.
If you're going to emigrate down there, wait 4 years.
At least give it a couple of months, let it
yeah, probably. Cass went out and worked for Cody Nelson a couple of months back. He needed extra hands for some locations work down in Hamilton. She went froze her ass off in Hamilton overnight in, was that November, December?
Yeah, November.
That's awesome.
Good to chat with that guy again.
I haven't seen him in a long time.
Yeah, I bumped into him at the Limp Bizkit concert this summer. We shared a beer. It could not have been a more perfect place to bump into Cody Nelson.
You should have expected it.
Limp Bizkit concert. I know, right?
Yep.
Okay, who's got another question? Eric, you got something?
Yeah, so I know you said you worked on Prey. There was another project you said you worked on which you couldn't talk about. So my question is kind of about NDAs, because how does that affect you? Is there certain projects that you're never allowed to talk about? And if so, like how would you navigate telling yourself that you worked on a big project?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. That's basically NDAs and sort of how to operate within that, right?
Yeah, and like I think his question is like if you have a strict NDA about something, like is there still a way to put that on your resume for the next job?
Yeah, so I believe I've only had one NDA that included me not posting on IMDb or on a resume the name of the project. You can still do a pseudonym, like for example, Star Trek. I believe we worked under like Green. I can't remember, but not Star Trek. To which you could still put the studio, right? And so you get to say like, oh, I worked for Universal on this, and that's a strict NDA. Usually, it would be more around the script and the characters and where you're shooting, right? So a big thing, again, it makes you look nice and professional when you aren't posting things that can kind of give away the plot. The main concern that everyone should be careful about, because it is easy to screw up if you don't think about it. If you have in general, sharing where you guys are shooting before you shoot there is super dangerous. And that is something that if you start working on projects of a certain scale, paparazzi people will pay you tens of thousands of dollars to find out where Tom Cruise is going to be tomorrow. But that's obviously super unethical. And in general with NDAs, I typically just think of like, what is the set? What are the props? What are the characters? And the story, obviously. As long as I'm not sharing those informations in a way that gets out there, I feel secure. So like taking photos of a camera should be fine as long as you don't have the cast list on the side of it that says, oh, well, this surprise character that comes in at the end. Um, that's very privileged information, and it can cost studios a lot of money and PR issues if you know somebody gives away that The Rock's in this movie, but he only comes in the last 5 minutes. Um, yeah, so I would say being professional, it's not something you really need to worry about too much. Um, and like for myself, like you know, I'll communicate with my partner on what I'm working on. But the reason I censors myself about that movie is I haven't even signed an NDA, so I could tell you, but I highly doubt that they've announced that they're making that movie. And because it's a sequel, it means that people would know about it. And so it's very easy if that even just goes out in like a tweet or a comment on a freaking post, somehow it becomes a tabloid. I've seen it before. I've seen people on set who made the mistake. And they think they just post something and all of a sudden it's this thing on the internet. Like when I was working on Resident Evil, I wonder if I have it here. I was given a little gift by my second, and it was she did like these little player cards, like a Pokemon card of each person in the camera team. And so with mine, whatever, it was like he had my focus card and you know a few other knickknacks. The one for the DP she made, she drew him with this sandwich that he asked for like twice a day, every day. Um, and he posted on his Instagram while we are shooting the movie. Uh, and I want to say within 2 or 3 hours, it was all over the forums because apparently there's some sort of sandwich of consequence within the Resident Evil universe, right? And so he got a talking to. On Prey, somebody got a talking to, and I think maybe in some relatively not serious trouble, but they definitely had issue with the studio just because they posted a picture of the slate. And in that, I think I can't remember how it gave it away, but it somehow outed that the name of the person who was in the Predator costume, and that became a big issue because like I don't know why, but the studio had an issue with that. So that one also, you're under a pseudonym, and so the fact that our slate had the real name on it takes away any surprise from that too.
I would just say it's good practice to never ever post shit from set. Like, just don't do it. I mean, like, we're all like trying to be cool on social media, but like, you're gonna get in trouble. Someone's not gonna like it. They usually, a lot of productions will be like, hey, it's cool to post after a certain date.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, then you can post things, but like, just read what they're asking of you, and don't go around posting anything while you're like even that could piss off a director or a DP, right? Like that they don't want to give out certain elements of what's going on set. Piss off costume designers, man. That costume was not supposed to make it on line, right? So it's just general good practice. I know it's like big shiny lights and big toys that you see, and everyone wants to like impress their crush on IG, but don't post shit.
Shut down your blog, right, Eric? While you're getting your career up and running. Movie leak TikTok guy or whatever.
Yeah. So an easy rule of thumb that I know people do as well is wait for the movie to come out. Especially if like the behind the scenes are out, it might be a bit more of a fair game, but at the same time, the bigger the scale is, the more sketchy that gets. And like he's saying, I think it's something I felt like when you're managing people and you see them taking tons of photos that shouldn't go out, it makes you nervous because you don't know what they're going to do with it. And when you see people who are always posting, it makes you nervous because you don't know what they're going to do that's over the line. And once it's happened, it's too late. And so it is an attractive quality to just not be constantly doing that. That being said, indie films, things with your friends and all that, you should like, it's great. You know, you do have to market yourself too. And there is that aspect. Camera prep bays are a fantastic place to take photos. And yeah, like get the photo of you with the camera and all that, so you can show your mom what you do and all that. Well, Kyle, I just sent you a photo that I actually posted on Never Let Go. I still think it was very lame that they didn't agree with this, but it was essentially I had a Alexa 65, which is a cool camera. And we wanted a shot on the tree and we needed it fast. We were in the middle of the woods. It was like 2 kilometers to base camp. And so it's like, well, how do we get this shot with what we have? And so I ratchet strapped with my team this camera to the tree. It's like $250,000 camera, you just ratchet strapped to the tree, good enough. The shot was super cool. And even in that, I took the cast list off, I turned the monitor off. I didn't say anything about what show I was on, and I posted it after the fact. And I got a polite email saying, "Hey, just we want you to take that down. We paid for that camera, and it's not yours to share." Um, so I think that might be the only example where I've been called out. But
Literally just a camera stuck to a tree.
But it also makes you look like you don't belong. You know what I mean? The biggest thing is like you don't look like you belong if you're taking shots and posting. Like you got to be of the environment, and if you're of the environment, you're just doing the work, right? And if you're fanboying out on scenes and gear and slate, that tells people real quick that you're not of that environment and you don't belong there.
Well, don't worry, you won't be new by the time someone invites you on to a $20 million or $40 million. No? You guys can be new on a $500,000 horror flick, right?
yeah, well, and definitely the biggest thing is be mindful that might stress out your superiors, and we don't want to do that. So
it'll stress out the DOPs, it'll stress out the directors, it'll stress out anyone in production design or art department. Like,
well, and even if you're not taking photos and posting stuff to social media, like if you're on your phone, you're also not doing your job, right?
Yes.
Unless like maybe we're talking about somebody like a script supervisor that's kind of constantly
on the phone
taking the pictures. Yeah, like that is their part of their job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean that goes for any job, right? If you're working at like Tim Hortons and you're just constantly on your phone, your manager's gonna give you shit. There's no NDAs involved.
And I know, like as a director, I notice people that are on their phones. Like it bugs me, and I notice it, and I make it a point to tell the department head next time around, like, who was that person that's always on their phone? Maybe don't bring them around this time. Do you know what I mean? Like I make note of that, even if I don't know the person, it still stands out like a sore thumb.
The story came out recently, right? Nolan doesn't let anybody have phones.
Yeah, neither does Inarritu.
No, James Cameron nail guns people's phones to the wall if they ring on set. He has a nail gun and he just puts it on the wall of shame. No, it's Villeneuve. Villeneuve doesn't want phones on set.
Nobody likes it. And people notice it when you're on your phone on a set, even if your location's PA. But if you're in front of people and they can see you on your phone, that's not a good look. It's never a good look.
No, it is. So it's wildly accepted as well, and a total professional thing to do is to step away and do emails or whatever you want to do. If you need to scroll or whatever, just go to your camera carts or go to the craft table. That's totally fine. I think a huge part of that too is it is a respect thing, because it is saying that like I'm kind of put off or put out to be here. I don't know. It feels like this isn't enough. I need to be entertained as well. But the main thing for myself, having been above and below the line in various ways, is if you haven't been a director or a DP on a busy day, you cannot fathom how many things are in their brains at the same time. And so there's such a wild disparity in processing power going on, and anything that can kind of throw you off or make you feel like people don't want to take some of that momentum, right? It just makes it feel like you're alone, right? And so if you're the only person there is paying attention and you're behind, it sucks. But at least if everyone's standing at attention, they're ready to go, well, now you just don't feel like you have that barrier, right? It's just a bit rude to have to talk to somebody through that thing.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Talking about experience, what other mistakes you've done at the beginning of your career and how you would change it?
What rookie mistakes would you avoid at the beginning of your career if you could go back and do it over again?
That is a great question. The first thing I'll say is that you will never stop making mistakes almost on a minute-to-minute basis. And the better you are at recognizing a mistake, the better you will be, period. Because the people who don't admit it to themselves can't learn, right? So a big one for me, starting out, being eager, like I always wanted to work really hard, is it's very hard to admit to others when you've made a mistake. Um, but taking ownership over your mistakes is objectively the most useful thing you can do, and doing so quickly. And so at this point, like I don't think twice if I do a shot and I screwed it up. I'm the operator and I cut off their, little bit of the haircut or whatever it was. It's like owning that instantly, reliably is the most useful thing you can do. When you're starting out, it's hard because you're worried that people will think you suck because you made a mistake. But in reality, the people that I'm scared of are the ones who wouldn't tell me, right? So if I have a focus puller and they buzz and they don't let me know, well, now I don't even get to make a movie that's in focus, right? You've just stolen that from me. But
Out of focus, guys.
yeah,
Oh,
right. So
You missed the mark.
yeah. If you are a second AC and the camera dies because the batteries, and you want to blame the trainee or somebody, like all of those things really add up against you. But admitting it means you get to deal with it, and dealing with it is all that matters. That's huge. Probably many more though. Same goes with like L&Ds and stuff. Is like you are responsible for the gear, you're responsible for your time if you're late, and just be transparent about it. Like nobody needs a big excuse. If you show up late and then I also have to listen to your excuse, that sucks. Just I'm so sorry, I should have been here on time, and I will be. That's it, yeah, those are big ones for sure. I definitely leave for work way earlier than I used to. By that I mean like you do your time and you figure out, okay, traffic, and then I go and I get my craft services. And I've learned that not riding the line on that math is so good for your brain. I would much rather take a nap in crew park than run onto set eating my burrito at the same time and then kind of miss half a blocking. That's like the worst case scenario. It sucks. Yeah, those are some big ones.
Anybody else? Chatty. You have 3 questions? Hey, Finn, pull yourself together. It's okay. Tell all 3 of them to Diana. She can decide which one. No, I'm kidding. Okay, hit us with the first one. What do you got?
Have you found work-life balance? With work-life balance, like what's your advice? Or like when do you feel burnout and how do you deal with it?
How do you achieve a work-life balance, or do you care?
That's a good question. It's a really important question. I think for me, what I've been most successful with is you have to embrace what work looks like. And so, and by that, it's like if I'm successful, I'll be working 16 hours a day with travel, maybe 12 hours, maybe if you're lucky, 5 days a week for months on end, right? And so accept that reality and then think about what your life would look like that you'd enjoy while that's going on. So part of that for me is obviously with the luxury of being more senior in this, I save specifically knowing that I want to take time off between projects, because if I don't, then I'll burn out, right? And so if I do a 4-month show, I'm building into my own personal budget that I want to take 2 months off or 3 weeks off after that. Otherwise, I go into the next show and it just feels like I have no life, right? You can't be with your family, you can't do anything. And I guess like again, tailoring my life to sort of support what I do is kind of the most important thing that you kind of can. And then you just accept what you have to do, right? Like, so part of it, for myself, when you have to get up at 3 a.m. for a call time, like at a certain point, being sad about it doesn't help. It's you just learn to be good at that, right? And so now when people get up for the airport or whatever, I'm like, okay, like yeah. And it's a running joke with my girlfriend is that when it'll be 3 in the morning and I'm up within 5 seconds of the alarm. And it's just because I've gotten so used to like, well, it's gonna suck. I might as well. But that across the board, right? So like I prep a lot of my food because that's the only way I can kind of eat what I enjoy for my life. If you're just only ever eating catering every day, those are all ways that I've sort of tried to solve problems or inadequacies with the way that film forces your life. Um, yeah, I don't know, but at the same time too, like I have lots and lots of hobbies. I'm surrounded by many of them here. Um, and I deliberately, if I'm interested, try and take up hobbies that support my career, right? And so exercise is a really important one if you're in this business, just because you have to stand up for 12 hours a day. It doesn't matter what you do. That's a really smart hobby to just start investing in and having fun with, because if you don't do that, you know, your body might drag you away from the career that you want to do. Yeah, anything like that, right? Like I took up 3D printing because it means I can like experiment with shit on set and solve problems.
I think you raise a good point about like, the sort of typical, say, corporate lifestyle. You're working 40 hours a week and your work-life balance is, say, weekend or a long weekend. You kind of get that like work, play, work, play, work, play. But there's very much this culture in film production where you're just 70 hours a week for 6-8 months at a time. So you kind of have to budget for, say, a 3-week or a 2-month vacation, as you said. So
Yeah,
that's kind of
no, it's always my advice when I see a trainee upgrade, or like when you do start to get those paychecks, you need to keep in mind that essentially you work 12 hours a day, you're working a 60-hour week plus overtime, right? So I've had most paychecks are 80 hours of straight time, which is sort of how they break down the overtime multipliers. And so when you think about it, it might be a really nice paycheck, but it's 2 weeks. And that's sort of how I make sense of it, is that if I'm working 80 hours a week effectively, then I deserve 6 months off. Do I do that? No, that's pretty aggressive. But at the same time, if you're fighting to work 12 months out of the year, you can do that maybe 1 or 2 years in a row before you're pretty burnt out. And burnout is a real thing. People can see it. And
I think you said, you told me once you kind of did that, right? Was it like 2018, 2019, you went a little ham sandwich and felt like you.
that was the first time I moved to BC. It was super busy, and I started getting bigger and bigger jobs just after the other. And there was a production manager I worked with who, I don't know, we got on really well. And sort of as he grew, I grew. But it was like I think I did 4 or 5 shows where they literally overlapped, where I would be missing days of prep because I was wrapping out the other show, or I'd be leaving a show. Yeah, I guess usually I would start a show late to complete the previous. And it's in Vancouver, and so it was raining like hell. But what I learned at the end of it was, I think it was like 6 days out from the last show, and I was off. I at like 2 in the morning went to the hospital because I couldn't breathe, and found out that I had walking pneumonia for like 3 months. And I didn't know because I was so burnt out that just working on a film set in the rain at night feels like pneumonia. And that's still true. But so that would be an example, right? And yeah, obviously I don't think I was my best self either on set during those times. Your patience runs thin and all that. And a huge part of this business is people should want to work with you, right? Anybody who's of quality, well, now it's about who do I want to spend 12 hours a day with, right? So I'll take anybody who's good enough, and from those people, I'll pick the ones that will have a good time at 2 in the morning when it sucks.
Yeah, I've been telling them that for 2 years. I really like when you guys repeat my little nuggets of wisdom. That makes me feel good. Okay, you can do one of your other 2 questions. You're good? No, come on, let's go.
Bring it.
When I worked on set for the first time last week, I was doing one of my best trips, and he was debating between going into union and not going to union. So, is it is this the main goal to get into union, or is it not for everybody? And like why choose the goal?
You get that, Mike?
Is it the main goal to get in the union? Is that?
Well, he went on a show. He went on a show last week, and the best grip was kind of like sort of not sure whether they were going to do just a non-union or ACCP career or a union career. And I guess Nathan wants to know, like, what are the benefits to not going in it? I mean, I know you're maybe like, we know which way you lean, but you know, what are sort of what do those two options look like? What's the difference?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And luckily in camera in Toronto, every union has different rules, so I can't really speak to all of them. It's not nearly as hard of a question because union members are allowed to work non-union shows. Places like Vancouver or really Western Canada, if you're an IATSE 669 member, you cannot work on shows that are indie. And that's part of their push to get those shows to flip union, right? That's their control. And so in BC, that's a much bigger question because you now have to turn down work versus in Toronto, you can do both. So I guess the main thing is you got to kind of ask yourself, like in a best case scenario, like what do I want to do? And I think that's something you have to keep asking yourself throughout. You might have an idea like, I want to work for Christopher Nolan. And then you get on your first Hallmark and you're like, people are way too serious. This sucks. We're working so fast and for so many hours. I don't like this. I want to do commercials. And so if you enjoy like the commercial life, again, music videos or indies, that's great. And you should do that. To go the union road is within narrative the most reliable way to like earn an income that will sustain you. Obviously a pension, all those things are really good long term. But if working on, you know, those sort of shows like Star Trek isn't appealing to you, especially once you've dipped your toes in, like it is not for everybody. It's a very serious environment at times. It moves really fast and people could be shitty. Even if they're being professional, it can be too much for a lot of people, and that's fine. Because we're artists, right? And so I think that is an important thing, is to recognize, is that the style of art I want to do? Because it is very corporatized, right? You will be told like, no, we do it this way. And so I guess it's a question you want to ask in yourself. Obviously, I think if you want to work with Nolan, or if you want to work on a TV show your mom's seen, you really have to go union. There's not much of an option there. But if it's just that you like to make moving pictures, then really I obviously start not union because you're there, and see if that's what you like. So.
Okay, go. Last one.
Okay, last one. Been in this for like 9+ years, right?
Well, he's been in the unions for 9 or 10, but so, what? Probably 4, 5, 6 years before that doing indie stuff. You're like 15 years total, give or take.
Yep.
What is next for you? Like, is there more, or do you feel like you're
what's next?
Yeah,
that's a great question. Yeah, so I mean, there's always a next. I think that's just sort of who I am, though. There's been lots of points where I could have been stationary. And like a big part of why I upgraded from a first, because I love pulling focus. I think it's a really great job. You get to run the camera department. Super, super fun. I think it was 2021 when I did Resident Evil and then Prey back to back, and there was other shows in between. And I looked at my tax return and I said, oh shit, if I don't upgrade, I'm never going to, because it was too comfortable, which is great, super privileged. And then I decided to upgrade because I've always wanted to be a DP. I've always enjoyed dabbling in directing. And being a 50-year-old focus puller is not a great place to jump in at that. It made sense when I did. And then I made the jump, which essentially said, hey guys, I don't do the thing that you want me for anymore. And then we had 6 months of strikes, and so I'm doing fine now, but it was a hilarious timing in that it was like, oh, it's too busy, I'm doing too well. And then as soon as I say, you know what, I'm not doing that anymore, and nothing. But yeah, so for me, I guess it's to just keep pursuing that. I just want to keep getting better and better. I do enjoy narrative, and so the idea of the studio system, I really appreciate. I know a lot of people are against it. I think that there's a lot of immaturity in sort of hating the thing without you like kind of understanding why all the cogs spin the way that they do. It's a really hard thing to make it better. You'll get paid a lot of money if you do. But for me, I find it really appealing because if you have a strong vision, and you understand how the system works, it is utterly like earth-shattering what you can do. And so that is the thing that really excites me, right? When Roger Deakins says, "Ooh, you know what? I want to build a chandelier with 30,000 bulbs in it," and he knows who to talk to and how the budget is and all that, he can go and do that for one scene essentially. That's super cool and excites me, right? So those are the sort of problems I'd love to solve.
Cool. Okay.
Right now, when people talk about the union, it's flexible to work in union and do non-union stuff as well as you say earlier. I have a really close friend, just seen his art. If you watch hockey and football, his art completely. He is a non-union worker, but like when I was talking to him, he told me that I don't want to take unionized jobs because they are very restricted. They don't allow you to do anything outside of it. So I'm kind of getting confused about it.
We can talk about that.
Yeah, that's your friend works in commercials.
Yeah,
it's a different world. The
Yeah.
narrative, totally different world. So it's two different.
Yeah, and it depends. It depends on the union. It depends on the city. We'll get into that a little bit. Okay. Okay, Mike. Thank you so much for your time. Everybody. Obi canceled on me, so I let these guys steal a little more of your time than we had talked about. I hope that.
No, it's great. Super fun. I love this stuff. And like anybody, if you have specific questions, especially like I've been there so many times on set with like some sort of technical issue that is just lighting your life on fire. Feel free to reach out on Instagram or wherever. Like I'm happy to just dive in because I enjoy this stuff and yeah, and that probably goes for most people in the industry is don't be afraid to reach out.
I keep telling them that like there isn't really an industry like this where people just want to flex their knowledge and are happy to like share their experiences and let some random student wear their Steadicam for laughs one afternoon. Like,
yeah, well, it's like my mom doesn't want to put on the rig. It's you can't really talk to people about the complexity of why you hate Teradek. And so you put all this brain into one stupid tiny problem, and there's very few people who could appreciate it. And so it is fun to just kind of explode in sort of the journey that you've done.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. I'll share the students' social media stuff with you, or share your social media stuff with them, and I'll make sure these guys get to see your predator photo. It tickles me big every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Hey. Bye, everybody.
We'll talk to you soon, buddy. Yeah, no, I think like we got nothing else. Like our other two potential leads are non-existent at 6 o'clock. So yeah, it's fine. I think like so. I did have a name that dresser potentially lined up, and they ended up getting called to some Netflix show. Which is why I kept Mike around a little longer. He's always so good. Yeah. Yeah, Mike was my focus puller for literally every project I shot. And then we were both kind of at like a going or not going, and he was like 28 and I was 38, so So like, you want to know how you get work-life balance, Mason? Leave the fucking industry.
Yeah, there's no work-life balance. There's not. Like 20 years into